a disaster at the start. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. Today, we are talking about Germán Berterame, official, an offer for a 19-year-old out of Argentina, Tobías Ramírez, and we're going to build a preseason checklist. Lots of talk about what matters and what doesn't after last weekend's game. Let's build a checklist so that we don't have to wonder what matters or what doesn't. We already have a built-in list of things to evaluate and things that we can just put to the side as not mattering. Saur, how you feeling, man?
You know, I'm oscillating over the last week between wanting Inter Miami back, but also not wanting Inter Miami back. Because the more I see Inter Miami play, the more I think about it, and I'm like, damn, I want this team to do something that they're not going to do. And that's going to frustrate me. And that's going to put me in a bad mood sometimes. And then they're just going to go out and blow the other team out of the water anyways and get like a really nice win. So I'll get excited about it. And then the next game, they're probably going to play really poorly and Javi Marchand is going to make mistakes. So I am basically suffering from PTSD from the first half of last season. And I feel like at the start of this season, we're going to have to wait before this team fully immerses itself into the beast that we know it can be. We're going to have to wait for Javi Marchand to make his mistakes, understand how he wants to play with this team, embed all the players. So I think at this point in time, I'm not ready for the season to start. Ask me again tomorrow, and I'll definitely be all for the season to start, and I'm going to be very excited for Inter Miami. So I feel like I'm going through a bit of a bipolar phase of wanting Inter Miami to play, but also not kind of ready to criticize Inter Miami for the things that certain coaching decisions make happen on the pitch. How are you, man?
Funny. I think we're in absolutely opposite spots where I kind of have low expectations, and not low expectations is the wrong word. This team is going to be really, really good. I think last year was the year that it had to be done, and the pressure's kind of off, and now it's like, let's do everything we can, but it doesn't have to be like a must do. It's not in my brain at least. Certainly that's not how the club is thinking or talking, and I want to be clear about that. But so it's like everything will be bonus from here, in my opinion. And that is allowing me to be a little bit more
I hope I can get to that
happening.
point because it sounds like you've reached nirvana with this Inter Miami team. And I want that as well, man. I want that as well.
Well, I think it's a role reversal of what last year looked like, where I just felt they had to do it. They had to go win the MLS Cup. I thought they had to go win the CONCACAF Champions Cup last year, and then when they didn't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, I was obviously very disappointed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Berterame, because Inter Miami made it official a couple hours ago. $15 million. He is the third DP. He is the DP number 9 that we talked about the day after the MLS Cup final. We wanted to go in this direction. We thought the evolution of Inter Miami was sort of necessitating a DP attacker to pair with Lionel Messi. And for a while, it didn't look like that's what we were going, but it is where we ended up. He's official. 3 DPs, 3 U22s, no getting around it. Everything is a lot more clear in terms of the roster construction. How you feeling about it, man?
I'm very excited to see him play. I think we need a player of his profile leading the line. I know you are a little, I don't want to say skeptical, but measured in your understanding of how he might change and how he'll be up front leading the line for Inter Miami. But I'm very excited to see him play. I wish we could see him play tomorrow, but I think it's a little too early. I don't even know if he's traveled with the squad.
I think
to
he'll
Colombia.
play next weekend for sure.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for him. And I can just see a stretch during the season where Berterame goes on a hot streak and just cannot stop scoring. That's going to feed a lot of Inter Miami fans for a while. And I'm excited for that. He's going to be a 20-goal striker this season if he can bury the chances that Messi creates for him. Don't be surprised if it's another Tadeo Allende situation, slightly better. He's a proper striker by trade, and I think Inter Miami has done well with this acquisition.
No, I think he's going to be a really good player. I do. Of course, I think he is a good player, and I think Inter Miami is going to get a ton of production out of him. I think the only thing about Berterame that's interesting is Inter Miami has used their DP slots on like World Cup winners and sort of world famous players. And Berterame is not that, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be really, really good at Inter Miami. So if you had your heart set on Lewandowski or whoever, right? Like Berterame doesn't have that sort of name appeal, but he's also 12 years younger and fresher and coming off a great season and knows all of the competitions you want to compete and win in, and has had success in all those competitions. So, like, I think it's a slam dunk signing. I really do.
Yeah. And sometimes pedigree matters more than actual brand value and superstardom. He's got the pedigree of playing in continental competitions. He knows exactly what it takes. He's going to have played against a lot of the opposition that we will eventually go up against. And that experience, understanding how to play against some of these Mexican teams, some of these South American teams, it's going to go a long way for Inter Miami, especially up top. And I'm excited for us to play with him up there and see what we're able to do against some very physical, tough opposition.
Not for nothing, but he is a guy that spent a long time working to get his Mexican citizenship so he could represent the Mexican national team on the international stage. And, 2 weeks ago, people would have said he's in the running to be a player to go to the World Cup. But this move to Inter Miami, I thought a lot of people inside Mexico, they thought this is going to kill the opportunity for him to go to the World Cup. I don't think he's going to see it that way. I think he's going to want to hit the ground running, banging in goals, and showing the powers that be. And I'm not sure the coaches for the Mexican national team right now, that he's not just playing for the best team in CONCACAF, but he's the best striker in CONCACAF. And you know what can help you do that? Scoring a dozen goals in your first 8 games, because Lionel Messi's just putting on a tee for you. So, yeah, I think he's going to hit the ground running. I'm really excited about this signing.
Just to the point, sorry, just not to harp on this a bit longer, but is it because the people in Mexico think he's going to be a second fiddle to Luis Suarez and is not going to get enough minutes? Or why is this considered as a slam dunk
they
death
think the
knell
MLS is less of a competitive league than Liga MX.
Yeah.
And also, listen, I think Mexico has some strikers in Europe and stuff. Like, even if he was still in Liga MX, I think it maybe was a stretch. But again, if Inter Miami tears through the CONCACAF Champions Cup and Berterame is scoring a dozen goals in that competition, like you can make yourself undeniable, I think, and this is a great stage to
anything he does thereafter is going to be completely irrelevant if he wins us the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Right, and I only bring up the Mexican national team because I think he's going to have extra motivation to really be putting up numbers early and often, hit the ground running, so to speak, and maybe that there's less urgency after the World Cup. But by that point, he'll already be settled in. Let's talk about how it affects the roster, because that's 3 DPs confirmed, and obviously we've been operating under this assumption for a couple weeks since the news broke, but it is now official. 3 DPs spending $15 million. There's no way to get out of him being a DP. Same thing with Rodrigo de Paul. Same thing with Lionel Messi. Those 3 are locked in for the foreseeable future. Hard to imagine that you're going to get out of any of those players for the next 2 seasons, or a year and a half at least. So for Inter Miami, this is what they're going with for the next little while. I think they have 19 players on their senior team roster now. There's in my head, a little bit of a question mark about Luis Peraza, who's the 3rd choice goalkeeper that they just signed. I would imagine he's on the supplemental roster, but we won't know for sure until the MLSPA releases salary information. If he is, then Inter Miami's booked at 20 senior team roster slots. If not, 19, which means they have 1 spot to work with. And now they get to go sort of look around and see if they want to add any pieces. I look at the roster as currently constructed, and I think they have everything that they need to field a first team squad. I'm trying to word this right, because you can't go into a season with 1 goalkeeper, for example. You have to have 3 goalkeepers. You can't go into a season with 1 striker. You have to have depth at that position. You can't go into a season with 3 center backs. You have to have more than that, just for depth purposes. And I think for depth purposes right now, they have a complete squad. Some of the younger guys, Keenan Hott, Del Talabe, this young 17-year-old Alexander Shaw, who they put a picture up and got his debut last week. Maybe that's a guy that is emerging as an out of the academy type of kid. Like, I think when you take all of those types of players into account, and Daniel Pinter up front, you kind of have the last layer of depth you need, especially once they sign Luis Peraza as that 3rd string goalkeeper. So I think they are set if they have to be set. And that is, I think, a good place to be before the end of January.
I think that's the right way to frame it. They have done what they needed to do to make sure that this team is where it's at to be competitive in terms of playing and in multiple fronts, playing on multiple fronts. They have potentially two very solid teams, starting 11s that they can put out. If we do the exercise of putting out our first starting 11 and second starting 11, I think it's going to be very surprising in the quality that we built up. Of course, some players may get abducted by aliens. Things happen throughout the course of the season, form dips. So it could look a little bit dicey at times. But when it comes to being in a position at this point in time at the start of the season, Inter Miami is in very, very good shape. I agree with you. Anything that happens in terms of incoming transfers now is going to be supplemental. And it's almost like we've reached that 100 level, and now we're just going for the 105, 110, 120. We're in a very good place as a squad. And it's also sometimes good not to have too many players. When your coach doesn't like to rotate a lot, when your coach doesn't like to rely on a lot of players across the board, and when you combine those factors, I think Inter Miami has hit the right number, has hit the right talent level and the quality. And more so, they've surrounded the veterans with some really young, fresh legs that I think it's going to put Inter Miami in a good position going into that first game against LFC.
So now you can do two things. You can either upgrade on the players you have, right? If you sign Tristan Blackman, for example, he upgrades your defense, and maybe it allows you to move the last guy off on your center back depth chart off the roster. Or you can go find a young, talented player and invest in the future, bringing him in now with your last roster spot and sort of develop him slowly. He doesn't have to come in and be an impact player, but you go out and get potential. So you can either go upgrade or you can go get a potential piece. And that's what's going to bring us to our next topic, Tobías Ramírez, a 19-year-old center back out of Argentina. He plays for Argentinos Juniors. Apparently yesterday, Inter Miami put in a $5 million offer for a percentage of his rights. There's been an update today, and we will get to that in a minute. But let's just start with, out of nowhere, he's not a name we've heard a lot about. He would be a U22 DP. We've talked about this plenty of times, that Telasco Segovia is a guy they could buy down from his U22 status and just put him on the regular senior team roster and still make everything fit. So they could open up a U22 slot if they wanted to, or if they had a reason to. What do you think about it?
I don't mind it. I think this is one of the two options that I would have gone for if I want to upgrade my squad further. Let's talk about it in a bit of a systematic, structured way. So right now, our two starting centre backs, for all intents and purposes, are Mikhail and Maxi Falcone. Noah Allen can substitute, deputize in that role, also be a starter. So that's three starting level caliber centre backs that we have. Let's put them that way.
I would even say 3.5, because I do think Ian Frey can start there.
Yeah. So I think we've got a solid 3.5 centre backs available to us. Lujan is another option that we have to play in that position. So there's backup. Bringing in a U22, I think, is added value. Unless he's phenomenal, I don't think how this is going to change anything as such for the backline, right? Unless he demands to be played every single game, unless his form is so good that you're like, oof, this is a player that we have to really play regularly because he upgrades everything else that we have. So I'm not too sure if this is exactly what Inter Miami needs. I know we let Toto Avilés leave, but Toto Avilés was also on the fringes of the centre-back role. He didn't get any opportunities there. Literally, he played a lot of the times he was a midfielder defensively. So that for me is one factor that goes against being too excited for this, because I think unless he's a superstar for U22 and we need to pounce on him and get him in and he's going to be the player for the future, that I can get behind. But again, not sure if that's the case. Now we've lost Sergio Reguilon, and for at least 6 weeks. Noah Allen's going to have to move to the left back side. I would have actually preferred somebody who can do a little bit of both, play as a centre back and as a left back. And I can see why the front office is thinking, okay, maybe we do need a little bit more depth in the centre back role, and we bring in an up and coming talent. So yes, there's logic behind it. I agree. But I think maybe it might have been worth going for a swinger. Maybe it might have been worth going for a midfielder. But that's the privilege, right? When we're sitting here talking about this squad being complete and squad being ready to compete at the highest level, at this point, you bring in anyone, it's going to be supplemental. So unless it's like a superstar player that's going to completely change the quality and trajectory of this team, I don't know. I don't think there's any harm in exploring positions and bringing in players that we think maybe build for the future. We can be a little bit more.
So let's just start with
it.
this kid. Let's just start with this kid. I don't want to get into too much detail about him. If Inter Miami ends up signing him, we will do a whole hour deep dive on him. But I looked into him, and I don't think he would come in and be a starter over Maxi
Exactly.
right away, is my impression. Maybe he would prove us wrong. Like I'm not going to pretend like it's impossible. And listen, last season in the summer, they bought Matteo Silvetti when there wasn't an obvious fit for him, and he clearly came in and claimed an obvious fit, and now we feel like he can't take him off the field. So, of course, that's possible, but I kind of agree with you. I think this particular player he's good, he's talented, he's young, and let's bring him in now and sort of groom him into being a special player.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's what this team has been all about this offseason. They have been very much focused on spending every resource to be as good as possible right now. I don't think you can't get a U22 player that is going to impact your team right away. Inter Miami's had plenty of them, and across the league there have been plenty of them. I have long talked about how fun it would be to have a Thiago Almada type player come into the midfield, and some people in the chat are talking about attacking midfielder, creative midfielder. You get a 21, 22-year-old to come in, and he spends 2 years here. You spend $15 million on him. Like you're getting a much more developed and impactful player, especially when we compare him to a center back it's just such a rep heavy position and takes so long to really mature and become mistake free. Whereas attacking players and attacking midfielders can oftentimes be more impactful earlier in their careers because of the way your skill set impacts the games and how those skill sets are developed in the various trajectories. I find it very difficult to think they're going to get a center back that's going to come in and improve the overall top line of the team.
And those who are saying we should maybe get an attacking midfielder, I want to maybe explore that a little bit, push back on it by saying, what's Segovia then? I know Javier Mascherano doesn't see him as that, but I think he'd be a perfect tailor-made attacking midfielder, the one that you just described.
I think Javier Mascherano does see him like that. He just doesn't play an attacking midfielder.
Yeah.
Except
which is
Messi,
weird.
Right? Unless if Messi's on the field.
Yeah.
And listen, we will have a conversation about formations and rotations and stuff like that in 20 minutes. But one of the exciting things about going out and spending a lot of money on an attacking midfielder would mean it demanded you to play more midfielders instead of this 4-4-2. So I can definitely.
I would actually. Again, we don't want to take away too much from the first preseason game, but I would actually try and get a ball-playing central midfielder, one that can spread the ball out, who's good with his long balls, who's good with his passing, who can, and doesn't need to be a starter, but can offer something slightly different. Somebody who's very good with his long passing, who can find a cross ball, somebody who is comfortable on the ball. Maybe David Ajala is that kind of a player. I'm not really sure. We're going to have to see.
So you're saying you want someone to replace Sergio Busquets?
I want to qualify that by saying it doesn't necessarily need to be. It can't be the same quality. Let's be honest. It can never be the same quality.
I guess I don't want anyone to get their hopes up because I don't think you're going to bring in a player that can do that better than Telasco.
Exactly.
Or David Ajala.
Yeah.
Like, you already have pieces that can do that at a very good MLS U22 type player level.
So at this point, you only bring a player in if he's completely going to change the ceiling of this team. If it's going to push the ceiling even higher. And the only place I think that can happen is a winger. I think we
Or,
can
yeah, a
maybe
forward or
upgrade on a
something.
winger or a
Or
forward.
maybe an attacking midfielder. I agree.
Yeah. And there's never too many attacking forwards on a team, because sometimes you go through dips in form, like we saw it today or Allende, and you want somebody on the bench to come in and do that work for you. So having multiple options is always good. Having multiple forwards scoring goals all the time is very good for your team. So that, I think, would have been a good investment. I'm not saying the centre back is not a good investment, but I think at this point the team is so complete. There's no obvious spot where you want to upgrade immediately, unless it's like a player you can't pass up on at all.
Well, and I think we saw the blueprint earlier in the season when they went for Tristan Blackman, is like, in order to improve on the two pair that won you the MLS Cup, you have to go get guys that are basically all-stars at the MLS level and
Yep.
guaranteed all-stars. And that's what they got in Mikael, and that's what they would have gotten in Tristan Blackman if they had been able to complete that deal. So it's like, that's the level of player you have to get to upgrade on this roster. And if you're doing that, it's going to be expensive, and it's probably not going to be a guy that's 19 or 20 or 21 years old. And that has nothing to do with Ramirez. I hope he has a wonderful future. But to me, that feels like a interesting decision, more of a let's bring him in and have him. And 6 months from now or a year from now, when he'll be ready to be like a guy that can be that, because we've
Is that a
developed him.
bad strategy though? Do you think that's wrong? Because what they're doing is adding bodies, and sometimes having bodies is good as well. But
I
is it
think they
good
have
for
enough
this
bodies,
team?
though.
Yeah,
I guess that's how we started this conversation, right?
because Javier Mascherano already doesn't utilize his squad as much. So you don't want to overpopulate your squad either. It's an interesting place to be as an Inter Miami fan, honestly. we're so, we're so spoiled for choice.
Let's talk about this player specifically. I will just say, I think $5 million is too much for this player. I just do. This is the same club Inter Miami got Federico Redondo from. Now, obviously, different player, different profile, different everything, different circumstances. I have long thought that everyone from the LPF is overvalued, and I think that would continue to sort of play out with this kid. I went back and looked at some of the ways people talked about Toto Aviles coming out of Rossing, and the way people are talking about this kid now. Both players, I think, are going to be somewhere in that $6 to $7.5 million valuation, so similarly valued. But the skill sets are like, this kid is better on the ball, better with his feet, but actually not as good defensively, and maybe makes a few more defensive mistakes, which I think is really tough to deal with. So, like, I think if you're expecting him to be even better than Toto Aviles, you're kind of being ambitious.
Expecting a lot. Yeah.
He would be better with the ball at his feet, and that is something Toto Aviles struggled with, but he'd be worse in one-on-one defense and stuff like that. So, I kind of agree with you. It's like, okay, if this is the guy the coach believes in and you have one spot left and you want to invest in the future, I get it. Maybe there's a way to get a more impactful piece, and that's the way Inter Miami's been operating this offseason, is let's go get the maximum amount of value. That said, if this ends up happening, we'll be his biggest fans. Here's
It's
the
very
deal.
interesting. I don't want to judge a player on their highlights. I hate doing that. So a player can be so much more than just snippets of what their best moments are. I think I judge a player more so by how they react in adversity and how they play under pressure when they're not playing particularly well. For me, that's what defines a player. But in those highlights where you could generally tell was what you pointed out, the ball playing ability, his line breaking passes seem to be very good. He seems to be very good for his age at distributing the ball, putting it out forward. Maybe that's something Inter Miami's looked at and thought, okay, we need something like this in our squad. Bring him in for that. He is a forward foot defender. He's not going to be one that's cleaning up behind you. He seems to be the kind of player that goes forward into tackles, get to the ball first, gets out of position, even if it means breaking the backline formation. So I think very similar to Toto Aviles in a lot of ways. Front foot defending, seems to be fast. I thought Toto Aviles was really good with his back foot defending as well and sweeping up behind when
I
needed.
did too. And I don't.
So
This kid wouldn't be
I
as
don't
good at
think
that.
this kid is the same. Yeah. And the one thing that he would be better at, as you said, is distributing the ball, because that for me stood out as well in the
he is.
highlights that I saw. So again, upside, yes. Massive upside, probably not. And
Well,
at this
maybe,
point, I think
but maybe it's 2 years away from the
yeah,
upside,
maybe.
not
Absolutely,
2
maybe.
games away. Okay, there was a report today, and I want to get his name, so I apologize. Lucas Gotti, he's a sports reporter down in Argentina, I guess, who wrote an article today, and I guess he heard from the agent that the kid's not interested in Inter Miami. He's more interested in a deal with Alaves, which is a La Liga club in Spain. Apparently, Alaves a week and a half ago, offered $3 million for 50% of his rights. Inter Miami, obviously yesterday, offered $5 million, and that was still not accepted. So it seems to me that this kid may have his heart set on going to La Liga, which can't fault a kid for wanting to go to La Liga. I get that. The European transfer market closes
in 2 days, 1 day,
Sunday.
hours, yeah.
We are talking in a number of hours at this point. The valuation difference between $3 million for 50% and sort of a $7, $8, $9 million valuation is kind of a big gap to make up in 48 hours. So maybe Inter Miami put in an offer to give Argentinos Juniors something to say we don't have to sell him for a cheap deal to Alaves because we have other offers. We've gotten a better understanding of what the market really thinks he's worth. But I wouldn't read too much into the article that came out today that said he wants to go to Alaves. There was some language in there that I thought was pretty stern, and it did not sound to me like it came from the agent or the player. It sounded to me like it came from this reporter sort of adding some sort of intensity to what I imagine those conversations were really like. So I wouldn't write it off yet. I think for the next couple days, while the European transfer window is still open, I think till Monday is when it closes. It's not going to happen. But if that closes and this player still belongs to Argentinos Juniors, I do think that's a name we should keep in mind. So
yeah,
that's sort of my take on that news from today.
No, that makes complete sense. And the clock is ticking on European transfer windows now, which means maybe we see a little bit more activity on the MLS side when some of the players that maybe wanted to move to Europe have not got those opportunities, and some MLS clubs start making moves, and Inter Miami might be one of them. I do think they're going to bring in at least one more player before the end of the transfer window.
Don't they have to now? Because once you signal your willingness to buy down Segovia, how can you just not do it? You know what I mean?
But it's also at this point they don't have to do it. Why do they have to do it? It's not like they need to do it.
Because they want to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
But if they don't get this player, maybe they're now looking at players. Now they're not looking at positions, right? Sometimes a team needs to, especially in the MLS, needs to first build on the position. They may not get their first choice midfielder, but they're going to go get a midfielder because they need to build that position up. Now we're in a good place where we don't necessarily need to look at positions. So now maybe we're looking at player profiles. We're looking at players who we think are maybe going to be brilliant in the next 2 years. We're looking at young up-and-coming talents that we want on this Inter Miami squad to learn from Messi while he's still here. So yeah, they don't have to do it. If they can't get, maybe the thinking is, okay, we really like this player. It's not about the centre-back position. I think he's going to be a really good player in the future. If we can get it done in this window, and if we can get him to learn from the likes of Mikael and Falcone, I think it's going to be a really good growth opportunity for him. Let's bring him in. And if we're not able to bring him in, then we're not going to go for a centre-back. There's a central midfielder instead that we really like, that we want to use our money on. Let's go get him. So that's what I'm trying to get at. And that's probably why I say they don't have to bring in a player if they don't want to.
I have my perception of what Inter Miami is actually capable of is certainly messed up. Certainly, I think Inter Miami can get more players than they probably actually
Yeah.
can. River Plate just loaned Kendrys Paez, who's this young Ecuadorian and he was bought for like 25 million by Chelsea, and they're looking for ways to get him playing time, especially at a club outside of UEFA. And River Plate just brought him in yesterday. That I think could be an exciting idea. Go find a player in Europe, especially once that window closes. That's 19, 20, proven a lot, and maybe is not in, fell out with his coach or whatever, or is behind a superstar on the world stage and just needs more minutes. That would be pretty cool.
And Chelsea has like 75 players sitting on the bench for them. They got all the youngsters around the world in their squad. So I'm sure they have a couple spare ones for Inter Miami as well.
Well, listen, like just spitballing, not spitballing, but just saying words out loud. If this if this Sergio Reguilon injury was like a bigger deal, like a guy like Caleb Wiley might be an interesting piece to bring in, formerly United player that now belongs to Chelsea. Like, I think there are plenty of guys out there. I think Wiley might be injured, but it's not the point. My point is, I
get your sentiment. Yes.
I think there's a lot of U22 players that you wouldn't be able to buy, but you could bring in on loan for this CONCACAF Champions Cup run. There is a conversation going on in the chat that I think we should touch on before we move forward, and it's about not having enough creativity in the midfield. And it's been a conversation I've seen a lot on social media. It's been a conversation I've seen in the chat when we did our last episode. How does that make you feel? Because I have thoughts, but I want to hear where you're at.
I think I was more comfortable before I saw the last preseason game. And I have a feeling I want to see David Ajala play, man. I don't know what kind of a player he is, and I need to get a sense of him in the Inter Miami team. But I can maybe understand why the chat is concerned. I might be a little bit as well, because the creativity that Sergio Busquets had was not just the creativity of one player. It was the creative outlet of at least 5 players in the middle of the park. He could do everything that we needed. I don't think we have that player in Rodrigo de Paul. I don't think we have that player in David Ajala. So who's going to be the one distributing the ball? Who's going to be the one pinging in those long balls? Who's going to be the one breaking the lines? We might need multiple players to do those things individually good, because I don't think any one player can do that anymore. I think we've definitely raised the ceiling in terms of athleticism, but connecting the lines, there's so many things that a good midfielder needs to do. Play as an 8, play as a 6, play as a box-to-box, play as a 10. Sergio Busquets offered everything, and he solved all problems. So now we're facing the same issues that other teams would face as well. And I think the way you solve that, I think you'll be able to get that creativity by playing 3 players in the middle.
So, okay, let's hold off, because you're going to change the subject.
Yeah.
I have to just say something, and it's... I just need to pour cold water on everyone. It's not going to be as good. It's just not.
Exactly.
And so this idea that you have to find a way to be as creative through the midfield as you were last year by bringing in another player or by putting a ton of responsibility or expectations on David Ajala or Yannick Bright or Tobías Ramírez or whoever, or bring in another player that's going to make that difference, it's not going to happen. They are not going to be as good from that spot because they're never going to be able to replace Sergio Busquets. And that is why they spent a lot of time and money and energy building a better defense so they could give up less goals. It's why they brought in a number 9 DP so they could score more goals, because they know they're not going to be as good in that aspect of the game. And so I just don't want people to spend the next 6 months thinking we have to go sign a guy to replace Sergio Busquets, because it's not going to happen. No other MLS team had that level of creativity in the midfield. It doesn't exist in this league at this level. It just doesn't. Inter Miami had a luxury that we tried to make sure everyone appreciated while we had it, but it is not coming back. And so Tobías Segovia, David Ajala, Yannick Bright, Rodrigo de Paul, these are excellent midfielders for this level. Excellent midfielders. And if they sign another one, that would be awesome too. But these guys are very high-level MLS caliber midfielders, and their numbers bear that out. Just because none of them are Sergio Busquets doesn't mean they suck. It doesn't mean we have to go find someone else. It doesn't mean they have to be replaced. And so I apologize for putting cold water in everyone's face, but the guys on the roster are really, really, really good. And they don't have to live up to what Sergio Busquets did for the last couple of years. And Inter Miami doesn't have to go chasing someone to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but there's also a little bit of a similar concern. I think you've got to a point that the baseline's been established. You can't get the same level of creativity in the middle at all, no matter who you buy. Even if you get Vitinha from PSG, it's not going to be Sergio Busquets. Well, maybe. But what I do think we've established that baseline, but we do need to see a certain. What you're trying to say is that these players who are good enough to do what they need to do to get the win, I think we need to see that in this preseason. Because I think there's going to be some chemistry issues. There's going to be some teething issues. How Javier Mascherano plays with his midfield is going to be an issue as well. So there's still concern. I think it's going to eventually look really good. But to begin with, I think you have to get to that point of, okay, we got a different midfield, but even that different midfield needs to do what's expected of them. It's not going to be the same quality, you're right. Absolutely right. But it can get to a good quality. And I think what the chat is worried about is we've lost that good quality as well. I don't agree with that. I think that these players are good enough to find that creative outlet to get things done. But yeah, maybe I'm waffling a bit too much. I don't know.
No, I just think it's important to remember we're not going to get back. We're not going to get the production out of left back that we got last year, and we're not going to get the creativity out of the midfield. It's just not going to happen. And so the question is, can you find other ways to win?
Pep, man, sometimes I think we just need to mute you in the chat because you make us laugh so much. I'm going to break. Yes, you're right.
We have to find a different way to make this work. It doesn't have to look the same. It doesn't have to work the same. The point is you have to win games. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, let's build a checklist of things we want to see this preseason. Because I'll be honest, I was reading everyone's commentary on last weekend's game, and this mattered, this didn't matter, this is huge, we look awful, we look great, he looks good, he looks terrible, whatever. And then we kind of have to come on and be like, well, actually a lot of that doesn't matter at all, but actually some of it does matter, and it's a blanket statement to say it's preseason, nothing matters. So I thought it might be easier for us to spend 25 minutes building a checklist of things that actually matter. I don't think what Lionel Messi does for the next 3 or 4 games in this preseason matters at all. If he looks bad, if he looks good, if he looks amazing, if he looks terrible, doesn't matter to me. I know when they go to LAFC, he's going to be good, and that's all that matters. I don't even need to see him play 90 minutes because I trust by the game day against LAFC, he will be ready to go. I think the same can be said about, Luis Suarez, Mikael, Dane St. Clair. Like, there's almost all of the professional level players on an individual basis. It doesn't matter to me how good they look. Now, some of the kids, I think there's a little difference, right? The super draft
that's
picks,
a very good point.
The kids coming out of the academy, I think those are interesting because these are their opportunities. But Noah Allen, Mikael, Maxi Falcone, etc., Ian Frey, it's just not going to change my mind what happens over these preseason games.
They've proven themselves. That's the point.
They've proven themselves, and this is just an opportunity to get in shape and get ready. So let's start with the young kids. We got a chance to see a couple of them last week, and I love that. But it was also exactly what happened last year. Mascherano was willing to give kids like Tyler Hall an opportunity in the preseason. We saw him for a couple bench appearances, and then it did not translate to minutes with the first team. Tyler Hall is obviously not Javier Mascherano's guy. He was signed before Mascherano came in. But all these super draft picks were picked when Javier Mascherano was here. And I'm sure he had some input on the type of profile of player that he might be interested in, even if he wasn't out there scouting college players. I am sure he had input into Daniel Pinter's signing and whether he was actually going to use him or was interested in him or not. And then there's another academy kid, Alexander Shaw, whose name just showed up in my book a couple hours ago. And then, of course, you still have Tyler Hall and Israel Boatwright and Santi Morales. What would matter this preseason? Because the fact that they get 10 minutes at the end of a game maybe doesn't matter, but what would matter?
I think the further we get into the preseason, Javi Mascherano is going to pick and choose who he wants to prioritize for minutes among the youth as well and the young kids as well. What matters to me is I want to see Daniel Pinter play with Messi in the field. He may not get that opportunity in the regular season, but I want to see him do it with the first team, because oftentimes you put some of these young players on the pitch when the big guns are sitting on the bench. You're just doing a replacement. I don't want to replace. Go on.
Can we make it, just because I want to continue, I want to keep this list going for the entire preseason.
Yeah.
Can we expand it beyond just Messi?
Yeah, exactly. I want to see him play with the first team, with the first starting 11. I want to see him come on as a substitute in the 65th minute, but it's not as a substitute amongst a bunch of substitutes. It's a substitute to see what he actually looks like in that first team. Does that make sense?
You want to see him come on at halftime, and then the rest of the first team come on in the 60th minute.
Yeah. I want to see what he would be like in a game against DC United in the 60th minute. And we can test that in the preseason. What does he look like with the rest of the starting 11? It's
not even about what he looks like, in my opinion. It's about the coaches wanting to involve him.
Yes, exactly.
More so.
Yeah. I think it's both ways. Absolutely.
I think any of the young kids, whether they're the homegrown players, the new ones, the old ones, or the super draft picks, if they play on the field with sort of any of the first team players, or more than like one or two that just never got subbed, I think that is interesting. And maybe that one player that gets that opportunity is really someone to keep an eye out this season.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a fair assumption, because it could be Daniel Pinter, it could be Santi Morales, it could be Keenan Hart. Who knows, man? It could be any of those. Yeah,
and that's the exciting thing, is these kids are getting their first opportunity as of in the last 2 weeks to prove themselves.
So who's going to break out? That's the question.
Okay, as far as player performances individually, I think those are the only ones that really intrigue me.
I also do want to see the new signings, right? Because David Ajala, we know he's a good player and we know he can do it in an MLS team, but how does he do it in an Inter Miami shirt?
Yeah, for me, though, it's not about... It would be fun and cool to see him play well, but I don't necessarily think it's going to change my opinion on whether he's going to play well in the preseason.
Okay.
Or in the regular
but
season.
yeah, I'm still keeping an eye out for it, though, because sometimes you just want to look out for the spark in a player.
Yeah.
We saw in the first game Segovia play that he had something. I want to see that for Moura. I want to see that for David Ajala. And I'm not saying they will have it, and that's not going to define my opinion of them. But here's the thing. If they look really good, that's telling me something. And if they look poor, then I'm going to give them the benefit of doubt that they're still embedding into the team. So a poor performance for me doesn't matter. A good performance for me will matter a lot. Because if David Ajala's on that field, taking initiative and taking the ball at his feet, doesn't care about Rodrigo de Paul in front of him and is making things happen, is dictating play, that for me is standing out a lot more. So I'm going to look at who stands out in that. And I don't really care about poor performances. I care about brilliant performances or somebody who actually stands out.
Okay, fair. I think the rest of the conversations about players are actually about how they interact with each other, not about individual how they look.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So before we get into some of the specific partnerships or groupings that interest me and interest you, let's talk about the formation, because this is the biggest thing to me that matters in the preseason. Game one, they went with a 4-4-2. Mascherano's almost his entire tenure. We did see him mix it up a little bit last year with a back three, but he always kept a front two. And I think Inter Miami has to move away from that in order to maximize what this team could be, especially with the roster as currently constructed. We just talked about they're not going to get the same creativity through the midfield without Sergio Busquets. It's just not going to happen. So you have to find other ways to build up. And adding another midfielder to create different triangles to help you progress the ball, like, is to me one of the easiest ways to just structurally enforce ball progression or improve your ability to ball progress. So we've talked about it all off season. I've been getting more and more nervous that we weren't going to see it over the course of the off season, and then we get to preseason game 1 and it's the same 4-4-2. I think if we see nothing else, it matters. And I think if we see something else, it matters. What do you think?
Formation matters. For me, this is the time that you experiment. If you're not playing a 4-3-3, if you're not playing a 4-2-3-1, whatever different formation you play, and I don't mean the hybrid that Javi Mascherano does where he's defending in a 4-4-2 and he's attacking in a 4-3-3. Of course, football's evolved beyond specific formations.
It's never a 4-3-3. It's
never a 4-3-3.
Defending in a 4-4-2, and then you kind of advance with 4 attacking players.
That's not what I mean. I think,
midfield.
and I don't mean seeing like a slightly different shape to a 4-4-2 in a game. I mean a proper 4-2-3-1, a proper 4-3-3. If we see those formations in the preseason, that tells me that Javi Mascherano is willing to use them in the regular season.
It can't be a 4-2-3-1. That's the same thing.
You get what I mean? I was just trying to put out different formations.
Okay.
You know?
No, but
I just want to see something different, man.
I think it does matter, right?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
You see a true 3-man
if you don't
midfield.
see it, then he's not going to use it in the regular season because he's not drilled the team in that way, right?
And I think this team is so. Here's my concern. I think Javier Mascherano knows that they are betting big on winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They're not going to have Busquets, and they're not going to have Jordi Alba. And so he thinks, or potentially he thinks, if we keep our cohesion, that will be our advantage. That we will keep a similar play style. We will bring back a lot of the same players. They brought back Allende. You know, they wanted to bring back Baltasar, Rocco Rios Novo. Like, they wanted to keep as much of it the same so that chemistry wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
And of course, if you switch your formation and structure, you're going to start having chemistry problems. It won't be as plug and play. That's my concern, is what Javier Mascherano is going to think. And so he's going to stick with the 4-4-2 through the CONCACAF Champions Cup run, thinking if we keep a system that everyone is comfortable with, we will continue to get results, or that will give us the best chance to get results. That's my concern, is that that's how he and potentially the club are thinking. And that's why we've seen so much the same. And I want to be clear. It's not what I would do. It's not what I would do as a coach at all.
But you're getting into Javi Mascherano's mind to understand why he would use that 4-4-2.
It is at least on my mind that is the thinking.
Can I ask you a question that's maybe slightly digressing from the topic, but interrelated in some way? And this is a genuine question. It's not rhetorical. In that playoff run towards the last 8 games of the season, what formation were we playing?
It never didn't look like a 4-4-2 to me. Like, I think when we got into the playoffs, Baltasar spent a little bit less time getting forward and played deeper, and that helped. And so did Jordi Alba, for that matter. And that was allowed to happen because Matteo Sovetti was carrying more of the load going forward and was doing it in a more
But we were just
way.
playing a 4-4-2, right? With Baltazar on that wing, Allende on this wing, and Messi and Silvetti up top.
Yes. And then even going before those 4 games, you just switch Suarez with Silvetti.
Yeah.
But
that worries me.
The thing that was different in those last 4 games is that Messi became the striker, and Silvetti was sort of an off, he became the number 2 attacking option. And then it allowed you to have more runners wide, and it did open things up and make it more dynamic. So it wasn't the same, but structurally you never had 3 true midfielders on the field. And that, I think, is the thing I want to see. And you sort of extrapolate what this new roster looks like in that form of playing, and you want to see, okay, how can we maximize this? And now that we don't have to cover for Jordi Alba defensively, or Sergio Busquets defensively, or a bad goalkeeper defensively like Ustadi, like, we can do more aggressive, athletic, game-defining things and keep that Messi gets on the ball with a bunch of athletic players around him and maximize that by going to a 4-3-3. To me, that seems clear.
That makes sense. But yeah,
But
formation is going to be important.
it's not what happened in game one. Hopefully it's what happens tomorrow. Okay, so
We'll find out tomorrow.
it also matters if they don't change formation, right? Like that means something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the opposite, because if you're not using any new formations, then I think during the season, especially at the start of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, I wouldn't expect them to play something different. They're going to stick to what they know, especially when it's crunch time. So, yeah,
I agree.
that matters.
I think if they don't try something in the next 4 games, it's because they're thinking the way that I just sort of mentioned.
Yeah,
We want to stick with continuity because we had a great team, and they had a great team at the end of the season, and not even just the last 4 games. If you look at the last 2.5 months, they were scoring more goals than they did at any point in the season. They were giving up fewer goals than they had at any point in the season. So like they were very good the last 2.5 months of the season. And so let's just roll that through. And all these other teams around us are going to be worried about, Nashville, potentially first round opposition. How do we get Christian Espinoza involved? We know Espinoza is a good player, but the chemistry issues, what formation do they put, and maybe
there's going to be rust. There's going to be chemistry issues.
We're going to crush them with our continuity. I just think that's hard without Busquets and Alba, but that's
exactly. You've lost half your continuity with that. But anyways, I think we're becoming depressed again, aren't we? No, we're just creating a checklist.
It is super interesting though, I think. It doesn't have to be depressing, right?
No, I agree.
Okay, so for me, the other things that matter, how do these guys look with each other or compared to each other? I think there's a couple position battles that are interesting. Ian Frey and Facundo Moura is one that I really have an eye out on. Ian Frey obviously gets the start. I think there's a lot of things that could tell you either one is going to be the guy Mascherano prefers.
Yeah.
We saw last year that Mascherano got into a rhythm with Yannick Bright and Federico Redondo where he was kind of rotating them every other game. What will that end up looking like, and will we get a glimpse of it in the preseason? I just mentioned continuity. That would imply Ian Frey would get the nod for the first part of the season, or at least first dibs at it, or first crack at it. But Facundo Moura, free agent coming in, I'm sure they had conversations about what his role would be, and he is Argentine, and maybe that is like someone they really want to prioritize. Do we see over the course of this preseason some sort of role or like understanding of how that is going to relate to each other?
Yeah, I think
that matters
so.
Or not?
I think that matters, but maybe less so because in my mind, Ian Frey is going to win out that battle 9 out of 10 times eventually over the course of the season. He's going to eventually cement his place as the number 1 right back. I think Moura's a good player, but he's not like a fantastic player. And Ian Frey has that X factor, that spark. But you're right. It's a position battle that we're going to have to keep an eye out for. And who gets more minutes, who's actually playing with the main players, let's call them that. It'll be interesting to see. I do think it's going to be more 60-40 than 70-30, as it would have been on the left-hand side with Sergio Reguilon being the 70, Noah Allen being the 30. But it's going to be an important battle for me to keep an eye out for. And also looking out for how Moura is treated by Javi Mascherano.
Another thing I'm interested in up the middle is, can Noah Allen, and maybe we won't get a look at this now that Reguilon is injured, but can Noah Allen and Mikhail play on the field at the same time?
Because we mentioned there are 3 centre-backs that are starting caliber. I don't think it's cemented in stone that Mikhail and Falcone are going to be our starting centre-backs. Last year we got in Lujan, and Javi Mascherano was determined to make him our starting centre-back. Didn't work out. So does Mikhail and Falcone work out? Are 2 really hot-headed players going to actually be able to play together? Well, we'll see what Mikhail looks like. But yeah, Noah Allen, Mikhail is a good combination to look at as well. That's an option that you can use if you want to rest Maxi Falcone as well. And you don't want to...
It feels weird because they're both left-sided center-backs. But that's never stopped 2 right-sided center backs from playing with each other.
Exactly.
And few teams actually have the ability or luxury to have 2 left-sided center backs on their team. So the idea that they could play together, I would be very interested in to see if that's something.
And the thing is, when you got 3 starting caliber center backs, you can just rotate amongst them. You don't have to drop the quality and go back and dip into your deeper center back depth or roster. Right? You don't have to bring on a Luhan if you don't want to. And even if you're playing a really difficult game in the MLS, you can play Mikhail and Maxi Falcone in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And if you want to rest either one of them, let's say in this case, because we're discussing the Noah Allen Mikhail chemistry, you want to rest Maxi Falcone, you can just play Noah Allen. But that will only happen if you let them build the chemistry. And we want to see how that looks. And the preseason is the right time to do it. So, yes, I want to see what the center back permutations are.
It has nothing to do with how they look. It's whether Mascherano would
Wants
be willing
to
to
play
try it. If he would be willing to try it. So that's something, and maybe we won't get a chance to see it because of the Reguilon injury. But that brings me to my next point. Do we see Facundo Moura at left back? I get people have said he's done it before, but we haven't seen it in Inter Miami. We don't know if Javier Mascherano trusts that. He is a right-sided player. Is he interested in having a right-sided left back, or does he value sort of positional balance and the footedness of that spot, especially because, well, for all we know, he heavily relies on the left back to be a huge creative piece. It's all we've seen so far. He'll have to adjust this year. But can Moura play left back under Javier Mascherano? I think is something that would matter to me, and it would make me feel a lot better about.
Does Javier Mascherano want Moura to play left back under him? That's, I think, the right way to frame it, because he could be forced into that role.
Or is he even
does Javier Mascherano want to do it? Yeah.
Or would he put Mikhail out there? Like
Yeah. Interesting.
I do wonder if, because coaches get weird about stuff like that sometimes. Okay, let's get into the midfield.
Best spot.
There's 4 midfielders that I think should be starting game in and game out. And if you only have 2 spots, that means only 2 of them are which
criminal.
Is maybe the biggest thing about going to a 3-man midfield. But how do they play together? My sort of impression is that from most defensive to most attacking, it will go Yannick Bright, David Ajala, Rodrigo de Paul, Telasco Segovia. But because none of them are sort of the exact same player, they're all in different spots on that scale, you can create a really interesting number of midfield combinations with that trio. And I want to see experimentation with that this preseason, and I'm pretty sad we haven't seen that so far.
There's two conversations here. Let's talk about the 4-4-2 conversation with the 2-man midfield. That in itself is very interesting because you said it. We saw Yannick Bright, Rodrigo de Paul in the middle together. We can see Yannick Bright and David Ajala together. We can see Rodrigo de Paul, David Ajala together. We can see Rodrigo de Paul, Telasco Segovia together. That, I think, is the most bizarre one.
No, but, okay, just on Telasco Segovia. He played in Portugal against teams like Porto and Sporting and Benfica in a 2-man midfield where he was one of the 2 midfielders.
When he was the pivot. I don't get why people think he's not physical.
He can do it. We have not seen Mascherano put him there, really, which is kind of my point on a lot of these things is like, is Mascherano willing to put this player in this role? I'm not sure I would include Segovia in a conversation about a midfield pivot.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So I think you're talking about 3 guys for 2 places.
Exactly.
And then add in David Ruiz and some of the other guys.
And so here's my point. This, for me, the most interesting bit is whether we see David Ajala and Yannick Bright play together. That, I think, is going to be very exciting. I want to see what that looks like and whether Javier Mascherano uses that. The second piece of this is David Ajala able to play on the wide forward side? So if we want to bring off Silvetti, we saw Segovia playing as the wide forward. We saw the wide midfielder. We saw Allende play as a wide midfielder last season. Can Ajala play slightly wider? We even saw Rodrigo de Paul at times play as a wide midfielder. So I want to see if he actually plays as that 4-4-2 with Yannick Bright and Rodrigo de Paul in the middle, and then David Ajala maybe further wide.
Yeah,
that could be a potential thing.
I want to amend an earlier statement. The closest I think we ever got to a 3-man midfield was when he put Rodrigo de Paul sort of out wide. Because de Paul didn't play out there. He kind of just cut in. But it was de Paul, Busquets, and Yannick Bright for, I don't know.
Do you think we see all of 4 of them together on the pitch at any point in time?
I think that's most likely to happen in a 4-4-2 in a way we don't like.
Yeah. So like Segovia on one side, David Ajala on one side, and then Yannick Bright and Rodrigo de Paul in the middle, or David Ajala, Yannick Bright in the middle, Rodrigo de Paul on one side, and Segovia on one side. Interesting.
Yes. I don't think I see a 4, or the other way you could do it is if Messi wasn't on the field and Segovia was filling in for Messi.
Yeah.
I think the midfield's so interesting, and I do think it matters. Not how they perform, but what Mascherano is actually willing to put out there. Because I didn't, we watched him for a year, Mascherano. I didn't get the sense he was particularly experimental with what his players were capable of.
Yeah.
Maybe that changes, part of the growth process and all that stuff. Not saying it can't happen, but it didn't feel like it. And I distinctly remember last year in the preseason us talking about how, man, all these new signings have a lot of versatility and flexibility.
No versatility or flexibility.
We didn't see that really play
None of that the entire season.
Okay. And then the other one I'm really interested in, and this to me is the most interesting. Can Luis Suarez and Germán Berterame play on the field at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they can. But maybe that's without Messi. Does Berterame play as the Allende role?
Fine. If it's without Messi, fine, they can play with each other. But I'm talking
with
about
Messi. Yeah.
I'm talking about, is there any starting 11 that you would take into a must-win game that includes both of them? And I get everyone in the chat's going to say Luis Suarez is not that guy. And I think with Berterame on the roster, I struggle to really see how Suarez has any sort of role this year. So maybe it won't happen. But like it is Luis Suarez, and
I think there are 2 points in this. Of course, the Luis Suarez conversation is very interesting. Does that mean Berterame play as a wide forward in that midfield four? What happens there? So yeah, I agree with you. That 4-4-2 with Berterame and Suarez up top would be very interesting. The second thing that I would think would be interesting is if he plays Allende and Berterame together as a strike partnership as a 4-4-2. Maybe that's something that we see at some point. I don't know if that's possible as such, but yeah, that could be an interesting one.
Is there any? I've mentioned a bunch, but are there any that's on your mind before I change the subject?
No, I think that's about it. It's about the combinations, isn't it? The partnerships, the relationships. That's what it's about.
And part of it is, for some of them, how do they play? How do they interact with each other? I think we have seen a couple times, like when Matias Rojas first came, he and Messi had instant chemistry. You could see that right away. So I think if we see something like that, it would be really exciting. But to me, it's more about, is Javier Mascherano willing to do this?
Yeah.
And I think if he's not willing to do it in the preseason, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah. So is our checklist ready then?
I think so. I think it's about the combinations. I think it's about whether we're experimental with the formations, and I think it's whether any of the young players can get on the field at the same time as the big players. Not because they need to show it in the game, but because they are earning it by showing it in practice and training. Okay, here's my last question. Fun exercise if we have 5 minutes. What do you think our starting 11 is going to look like?
In the first game?
If we had a must-win game, assuming Reguilón is healthy.
At this point in time. Okay. We don't know who's in form. None of that. We don't know who's playing well, who's better. We haven't seen David Ajala. None of that.
Let me put it this way. They're going to play Nashville at home on March 18th. Let's assume Reguilón is healthy by that point and everyone else is healthy. What do you think Javier Mascherano's plan is today for that game?
Oh, so simple. Dane St. Clair in goal. Mikael and Maxi Falcone as the two centre-back partners. Reguilón is left-back. Ian Frey is right-back. Tadeo Allende is a wide midfielder. Silvetti is a wide midfielder. Midfield two of Rodrigo de Paul and David Ajala. Front two of Messi and Berterame.
That's a 4-4-2, man.
That is a 4-4-2. That's what's going to happen. And maybe at some point it changes during the game, but that's what's going to happen. You have two really good wide midfielders that you can use to have width. So we'll see.
We haven't
And if
seen
Messi
Silvetti.
falls in the middle, it becomes like a one-man forward line.
We haven't seen Silvetti play that role. Like the sparks we saw from him were not in that role.
They were up top. Yeah.
They were up top. I think you're right. I would guess the exact same thing. I agree with you. It's actually simple exercise if you pay attention, and that's why I think it's a 4-4-2. And that's sort of been my thinking for the past 3 or 4 weeks. Is like
There's just not enough justification for all those people saying that he's going to revert to a 4-3-3. Like, there's just not enough there. He doesn't have to if he doesn't want to. People are saying, oh no, he's going to have to play a 4-3-3 with Berterame. No, he doesn't. What makes you say that? That's the only thing. I don't think there's anything forcing him to play 4-3-3 at this point in time. So maybe we're wrong about it. We'll see. It's just hope, man. I think it's hope that's what's driving people's understanding that it's going to be a 4-3-3.
I also want to say they could go with that formation, the exact
And they
lineup
win
that
it.
just went out,
Yeah.
and they can win the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Absolutely.
So, I think we're both on the let's try something more aggressive in the midfield. That's what we want. B, we both think that this team is good enough to win everything, in spite of the fact that we think they're heading towards a 4-4-2. And C, it's Friday night and we got tables to go dance on. So any final thoughts? Tomorrow is game day. Actually, can I take over for like 4 minutes? I have to take.
Oh, yeah.
Colombian soccer is, to me, the most interesting soccer outside or in South America, because 10 years ago, I got really interested in Colombian soccer for some reason, and I spent a whole weekend reading all about it, including Atlético Nacional, which is the team we're playing tomorrow. And so the fact that Inter Miami has actually scheduled them is so interesting to me. A lot of people know they're the Pablo Escobar team. I will just say, very misleading how people feel about that team. Just for the record, people think he went out and bought all the best players. And actually, that's not what happened. The money he brought was just allowed them to keep some of those players beyond their teenage years and into their sort of early mid-20s. And that was the group that sort of went on to win the Copa Libertadores. But they were kids that were from like the area and neighborhood and from Colombia. It wasn't like he was bringing in a bunch of foreign products. And so they won it again in 2016. This is like the best club in Colombia, and it's one of the best clubs in South America outside of Argentina and Brazil, if not the best club. They are the last club to win a Copa Libertadores outside of Argentina and Brazil, and I think it's really cool we get to play this team. The other thing I will say is that I also looked into pre-Pablo Escobar Colombian soccer. There's another club called Millonarios, which was the historic great club from Colombia pre-1980s. And they had a player named Di Stefano who ended up being like the first ever Galactico at Real Madrid. So fun connections in Colombian soccer. That's all I got.
Didn't any of Inter Miami's players go to Millonarios as well?
Emerson Rodriguez.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
So connections all around. Always love a good history session from Scotty.
Yeah, I didn't have a plan for that, but I was listening to reading some sort of previews about this. Saw lots of the Pablo Escobar thing, and I was just reminded of this weekend I spent reading all about Colombian soccer, like almost a decade ago. But good times, fun stuff, and that's all I have to say. Saur, we'll be back tomorrow for the raw reaction after the game. Are you excited? Are you as excited as I am?
Bring me a 4-3-3 and I'll be the most excited kid in town. That's what I want to see.
Quickly, what lineup would you ideally like to see tomorrow? Hold on, before we do, I should say Mikael is expected to be available for that game, and conflicting information about Germán Berterame, whether he's going to be down there and ready to play. Neither of those guys, or both of those guys, are still struggling to get their work permit. But you know what you can do? Go somewhere to another country and play. So,
yeah.
considering all that, what would you like to see tomorrow?
I want to see Dane St. Clair, Mikhail Falcone, Noah Allen left back, Ian Frey right back, midfield three of David Ajala, Yannick Bright, Rodrigo de Paul, Messi as a false nine, Allende and Silvetti up top. That's what I want to see.
Okay. I like it. I would love to see Silvetti on the left, Berterame on the up top, or Suarez if he's not available, Messi on the right, and then a midfield three of exactly what you said, and same back line, same defense. But, man, a 4-3-3 would get me excited. The opportunity or the idea that Messi could play not as a false 9, but as a true right winger, that would get me excited too. Any final thoughts?
Nah, man. We can only hope and pray and see what Javier Mascherano does. If you and I were the coach of Inter Miami, I don't think we would have done anything that Javier Mascherano does. In fact, we might have done the exact opposite. So we'll see. This Inter Miami team is going to be a beast regardless. So let's just sit back and enjoy. And hopefully this time we can get a win and celebrate a win in the preseason. Because it'd be nice to get one win in the preseason, right? Even though it doesn't matter.
Last year, we won all of our preseason games, and then 6 weeks later, we were as bad as we could be.
Out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back tomorrow after the game. No pregame show for the preseason, but we will be back right after the game for the Raw reaction. Hope you guys join us. Until then, have a lovely night. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.